Hi everyone, I welcome you all into this Dell Boomi session. So we had a break. I was into some medical urgency because of which we had to miss few of the sessions. But now I think things are a little better at my end. So I thought we'll resume the sessions. So if you remember in the last session, right, we started building a process, right, which was pulling the data from some file system. Yes. And what kind of data we had? Does anybody recall what kind of data we had? Was it XML, JSON, flat file,
XML.
XML.
XML file? And which business entity? Was it accounts, employees, orders?
Employees.
Okay, very nice. We were reading employees data, right? And that employees data eventually we were trying to insert into a database, right? Which database we were trying to insert into?
Oracle data.
Oracle DB.
Oracle database. Very nice, right? But it was not like a pass through. Okay, what is the meaning of pass through? Pass through means when you get something and you pass that as is to the target, that is called as a pass through interface. When you're working in the integration world, when you're talking to your customers or when you're talking to some seniors, sometimes they will mention this kind of jargon or a keyword, pass through interface. Pass through interface would mean that you have to develop a solution in in middleware or in integration wherein whatever data will come from the source, you will pass it as is, or there are very minimal transformations which are required. Then such kind of interfaces are generally called as pass through interface, right? So if you remember, we made use of few shapes, right? We definitely made use of start shape, stop shape. Can anybody recall which all other shapes we use and what for those shapes were used?
Data process shape for splitting and combining the documents.
Very nice. We use data process shape
Mapping shape.
for splitting and combining documents. Why was there a need of splitting the documents?
Because in one file we were getting many employee details.
Like in the decision shape, it used to execute only the first instance. It was not checking other things.
Yes.
Very nice. Okay, so we were making use of a decision shape, right? And in decision shape, if you remember, we were checking the location of the employee, right? And what we identified is when there were multiple employees data in the single file, right? Decision shape behavior was to just check the first employee data and accordingly decide the flow of execution, which was incorrect, which was not as per the business requirements. That's why we had to add a data process shape, and then we added a decision shape, right? And any other shape you can recall which we made use of?
Branch.
Branch shape. Very nice. What does branch shape do, guys?
Creates a copy of the original document
Same document.
To all the branches.
It creates copy of the original document. Okay, how many branches we can have?
Maximum is 25.
20.
Very nice. What is the minimum number?
2.
2 to 25.
2 to 25. Very nice, right? So now you have to tell me, does all these branches which are part of the branch shape execute parallelly or sequentially?
Sequentially.
So branch shape execution is sequential. Very nice, right? Okay, any other shape you can recall which we made use of?
Try-catch shape and
Set property shape to rewrite the destination.
Okay, first we'll talk about try-catch shape. Why do we need this shape?
to capture
Error
process
handling.
level and
Error
document
handling.
level errors.
Very nice. This is required for error handling, right? So what are the different types of errors we can have?
Process level
Document
errors.
errors and all errors.
Yes. So there is document errors, and there is another thing called as all errors.
All errors.
All errors is a configuration in your try-catch shape, but actually there is another error called as process error, right? When you say all error means you want to handle both document error as well as a process level error, right? So when the process level error will happen, typically the execution of all the documents will stop. Whereas in documents error, typically it means there is a problem with a single document, but still other documents can execute, right? Okay, any other shape? Somebody was calling about set property shape.
Set properties to rewrite the target location.
To override the value of directory and file name.
Yes.
Okay, nice. Any other shape you can recall of?
Process call shape.
Process call
Message shape.
Very nice. There was another shape called as process call shape. All are, woman power is only speaking. I mean, other people, I hope you, if you're not answering, that's fine. I don't want everyone to answer, but I hope you remember all these things, right? Some of you, if you're new to this session, please go through the previous videos. You will start following up. We have not covered much. We are still like on basics things only, but yeah. So there was another shape, process call shape, right? Okay, what is the use of process call shape?
To call another process. into a
Call sub-processes.
Yes, this is used to call one process from another process, right? So this will have two important configuration. One is wait for the process to complete and abort if the sub process fails. This is a certification question. So what is a certification question? They'll ask you what are the two different properties we can configure for the process call shape. One is wait for the process to complete, and second is abort if the sub process fails. So if you go back here, there was a process called shape, and can you see there are two properties: wait for the process to complete and abort if the sub process fails, right? So we'll talk more on this. Any other shape you can recall which we made use of?
message shape.
Which one?
Message shape.
Message shape, right? So at last we use another shape also, message shape. What is the use of message shape?
to generate either
Dynamic.
static or dynamic
Static or
documents.
document.
Yes, it is used. Actually, message shape can be used for some other purpose also, but the primary purpose of the message shape is it is used to generate some static or dynamic documents, right?
And also we can transform data from one format to another.
Yes, we can transform data from one format to another using message shape also. Okay, and this shape is very helpful. Sometimes what will happen is the data you want to generate, right? The format you want to generate is known to you, but you do not have a specific source. So if you remember in the last session when we discussed, we wanted to create a structure for the error handler, right? Which we created. Do you recall? This is the structure we created, but did we had any some specific source, or this source were multiple, right? We didn't had any specific source, right? We just created a dummy profile, and then to meet this requirement, we just created a dummy document, right? But what I'm trying to say is I need all these values to be populated, but all these values are not coming from some specific profile, right? Or these are not coming from some specific source. So when you have such kind of requirement wherein you don't see the values coming from some specific source, then in that case, you probably what you have to do is you have to use a message shape. You can achieve the things the way I did. You remember we were able to achieve this. We were able to do the mapping. There was no error as such, but this may not be the best way to do it. Whenever you want a target format, you know the target format, but about the source, you might feel that there are things which will get from n number of places, right? Or you do not have a specific source profile from where I can get all that data. So in that case, you can use message shape to do the transformation instead of using a map shape, right? But then this was also another way we did, right? So if you recall, we deliberately threw an error. How we threw an error? We just modified the username, right? So let me run once again so that we all are on the same page. We run test atom run test. Okay, so if you see here, the control came to the catch branch. Yes or no? So if you see here, you see this green color bold marks. Here it is red. Red means the error has happened. Okay, and what kind of error would it be? Will it be a document error or a process level error when the user details are incorrect?
Process level.
It's a process level error. Okay. Then it goes here, it goes to the catch branch. What will be the input to the catch branch?
Empty document.
Empty document.
Why empty document?
Because start shape of no data type.
Because
Yes, because in catch branch, you will get the same input as it
as
went to the
in
try branch
branch.
of the try cache shape. The input to the try branch of the try cache shape was an empty document, which you can see here. So you see the empty document coming over here, right? Now, after this message shape, what kind of document we'll get?
XML.
We'll get an XML with a dummy document, right? Why did we create a dummy document? Because map shape cannot be configured without a source profile, and we have to do some sort of mapping. Just to do that, we had to create a message shape and map shape, and then we see a process call shape. And to the process call shape, we are passing some document which may not be relevant right now. This may not be the right document which we need eventually, but yeah. And then to this process, if you want to see what happened to this process, right? This is another sub process, right? We essentially call it as a sub process. Okay. This is a sub process. If you want to get into the sub process, can you see a arrow mark over here? If you go to this arrow mark, it will take you to the sub process, right? So when you go to the sub process, you have a start shape of no data type, you have a stop shape. So what do you think will be the document which comes over here? The same document which was passed from the parent document, or what do you think?
No, empty document.
Why empty document?
Because start shape has no data type. If it has data pass through, then it could have taken the same data which we have sent in that process.
Very nice. So what is happening, guys? If you remember long back when we started talking about the star shape, how many types of star shape we have?
Four
Four
types.
types.
Four types.
Very nice. We have 4 types of star shape. Guys, I hope you remember all these things. These all are important. When you start working, you will realize having knowledge of all these is very, very significant. So what are those 4 types?
No data.
No data, data pass through, trading partner.
Very nice. We have no data, data pass through. We have got trading partner.
Connector.
Okay, connector or connection, whatever it is. Yeah. So now we have been using no data. Okay, we did one example for connector also. Now the third one, data pass through. As the name suggests, this type of start shape is used when you want the data coming from the parent process to be passed to the child process, right? So this is used when we need the data from the parent process to be passed to the sub process. Yes, when we have this kind of requirement, then we go for a data pass through type of star shape. So if you come back over here, you see, you go to this arrow mark, you will see there is a star shape of no data type. But if my requirement was to make sure, that the data which is generated over here should be passed to the child process, then in that case, I should have changed my configuration, and my configuration here should not have been star shape of no data type, but it should have been star shape of data pass through type, right? And the moment I make star shape of data pass through type, it is telling for processing starting with the data pass through, we recommend that you disable capture run dates. Okay, so I will say make the recommended changes for me. Some of you might be curious to know what does this mean, capture run dates. We'll come back to that. We'll save and close for the timing. We'll save. We'll run a test once again. Okay, so we again go back straight to the process call shape, right? This is a process call shape, which is calling another process. Here there is an arrow mark, which can take you directly to the sub process. I go over here. It is saying loading sub process result messages. Here we come to the stop shape source data. You see now this time there is a document. Last time it was an empty document. And what type of document it is? It is a same document which was passed from the parent one, right? So now I hope you understand that if at all we need to pass the data back to the calling process or the child process, sorry, then you have to choose a star shape of which type? Star shape of
Data pass through.
data pass through type, right? So I hope we are clear with this. Now, if you go here, there are two properties: wait for the process to complete, abort if the subprocess fails, right? So now, do you see this checkbox got disabled? Yes or no? This checkbox got disabled. If you go to the information, right? Maybe you can check the documentation. So what happens is whenever you have a star shape of data pass through type for the child process, you cannot uncheck this. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Whenever you have a child process, right? When I say child process, I mean sub process. Whenever you have a sub process which is having a star shape of data pass through type, for all such processes being called from the process call shape, this property gets disabled, which means this always becomes sequential, that your process call shape will always wait. Process call shape will always wait for the child process to complete, provided that the star shape in the child process was of data pass through type. So let me show you once again. I go back here, I change star shape of no data type, save and close. You come back here. Do you see this property gets enabled again? Yes or no? So now you can uncheck it. Yeah. But now I go back. I will make it of data pass through type, save and close. Come back over here. Do you see this property got disabled? Yes. So this is again important interview question which might be asked to you, that what is the significance of these properties, right? Any questions here so far from anyone?
Sumit, here, if we didn't use the data pass through, so what is the functionality of that wait for process to complete? If it is not disabled, like if we haven't used data pass through in some
Okay, so
process.
then in that case, what does it mean is, it means, let's say here we have a branch shape. Okay, let's assume that. Let's assume it is like this. Okay, and here also maybe I have something like this. Okay, just an example I'm taking. So now if you, let's say, go back here and you make this star shape of no data type. So you get an option, right? Whether you want to keep it checked or unchecked. Now you uncheck it. It means that this branch one will not wait for the complete sub process to execute. It will just trigger that sub process and the control will come to the branch two. So this is gonna be like a parallel not exactly parallel, but you can say nearly parallel execution, right? So you're not waiting when you uncheck this, you do not wait for the whole sub process to execute. Are you following me?
Yes.
Yeah, you do not wait
But,
for the
yeah.
whole
Means
sub
they
process
will
to execute. You will
they will
trigger it,
execute
and
pattern.
yes. Any
If we
questions
check,
from anyone? Yeah,
yeah, and if we check, then it will
it is
wait
sequential.
for the
It will
first.
wait.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So now what I'll do is I want to come back to, let's say, my previous version. I'll come to 106. I see 106 was the one, right, where I didn't have branch shape. I can save, and this becomes my latest version. Okay. I'm just explaining this so that you remember that there is some concept of revision history also. And if you want to go back to your previous versions, you can always do that. Yeah.
Sumit, also, can you explain that abort if fails that configuration?
So abort if the subprocess fails means,
Yeah.
if the subprocess is failing, you want parent process to also fail. Okay.
Okay.
Then it means if the subprocess fails, you want the parent process to stop the execution completely. Then you use it. Okay. If you
Okay.
want,
Okay.
if the subprocess fails, but still my rest of the execution should go on, right? Then you can uncheck this.
Okay.
So now let's move on, guys. We have to talk about some important properties. So eventually what we want to do is in the error handler, we need all these things. Okay. So one way of passing this whole information is using a map shape, right? Which is right over here in front of you. And other way, what I'm saying is we could achieve this whole example without using a map shape also. This shape could be used. We could use a message shape also, right? Because I told you message shape can also be used to achieve the transformations. So we'll understand this right now. Since we have a map shape, first let's go ahead with the map shape so that you understand how it works. This is very, very important. So now in the error details, first thing is you need is the process name. Yes, first thing you need is the process name. How do you get the process name? Is there any function which can give you the process name? String, numeric, date, lookup? No, there is no such function. So one way is you can just hard code that name. Okay, that is one way. So I take this name, I go here and I hard code, right? What is the disadvantage of this approach?
We cannot change this name at one time.
Yes, so if your process name gets changed, right, and if you forget to change this, then this will
It's
create
not
a
dynamic.
discrepancy. Yeah, this is not dynamic, or this is kind of this is
Coding.
actually supposed to be avoided. Okay, this kind of approach is ideally not recommended. Okay, but generally the process names will not change so frequently. So for now, we will live with it. Okay, for now, we will live with it, but I'll tell you how to make it more robust, right? Then you go for the error code. Let's say error code I'm saying is 500. This is again hard coded. Error type, let's say I'm saying it is a technical error. Okay, now error message. This is very, very important, guys. How do you get the error message? Now, when the control came to the catch branch, could we see the error message anywhere? We could see an empty document, right? Could we see the error coming to the catch branch?
No.
No, right? We could not see the error coming to the catch branch. Now the errors by default are stored in a document property. So if you go here, there are some functions. Can you see there are some functions related to properties? And there is a function get document property. And when you go to get document property, if you remember, I told there are different types of document property. One is related to connector, another is trading partner information, and there is one more which is metadata. And in the metadata, is there any property which you feel is related to the error handling?
Try catch
I
message.
catch message.
Try catch message. Very nice. Okay. So what I can do is I can go and this try catch message property will hold your error details. Okay. So you can just map this try catch message also, right? Now the next thing is about the error date time. So you have to get the current date time. So you go here. Do you see any functions related to the date? Yes. So now I'm saying I want the current date, and that current date I will map over here. Yes. Now how about the request payload? So these are reserved fields, right? Reserved fields right now I'm just mapping this dummy thing. That's fine for now. Okay. But can anybody tell me what about this request payload and execution ID? Now this is very, very important. Now you tell me at what point in time in this process will I get my request payload?
After disconnector,
Okay,
Wherever error, you need to
no.
get the current data in message.
okay, my question is, at what point in time do you have the actual data which is required to be processed in this whole process? After disconnector, right?
Hmm.
Isn't it? See, once you read the data, then only you will have the actual payload, right? Isn't it? So now what I want is, I need a mechanism wherein I can store the data which is coming out of this disconnector. Okay. I need a mechanism which helps me to store the data that is coming out of the disconnector. Okay. So whenever I want to store something, right? Whenever I want to store some values temporarily, what kind of mechanism do we use in any programming language? Let's say you are writing some logic, right? And you want to store some data temporarily. What mechanisms do we have in any programming language? Come again?
Variables. We use variables.
Very nice. We
Dynamic.
use variables, isn't it? Guys, if you have, if you know C language, or if you know Java or any other language for that matter, we use variables, right? Variables are used to store the data temporarily, right? So now in Boomi, there is nothing like variables, but we have something like properties, right? Can anybody recall what all types of properties do we have?
Document property, dynamic property,
Very
Right.
nice. We have document property.
Document properties,
process property,
process properties.
and
Yes. So these are 5 types of properties. We have document property, dynamic document property, process property, dynamic process property, MIME property. And this is one of the topics in Boomi which confuses people a lot, right? A lot of people get confused about it. That's fine. We will try to, make sure that you understand it in a clean and nice manner. But now what I'm saying is, these are the properties which we can use, right? So now what I want to do is, I want to go back here, and here right after this, I will use a set property shape, because I want to set some value. And please understand this set property shape, will it make a change in your document? These do not alter your document, right? These will just extract, these might extract some data from your document and store it in a kind of a variable, but it does not modify your document, right? So what I mean to say is, if there is some employee data which is coming out of this disconnector, the set property shape is not going to modify the original document. What all it can do is, it can extract some information and can store it for a later purpose. That's all. So I go to the set property shape. So there are options like properties to set. So there is a document property. So document property, I hope you understand, are some standard properties, right? Related to connectors and all. Then there is a dynamic document property, and there is dynamic process property. Now, whenever you want to store certain information, which is going to change for each document, then you have to choose dynamic document property. Okay, I'll repeat. Whenever you want to store certain information which is going to change for every document, yeah, which is going to change for every document, then you have to use the dynamic document property, because if you have 100 documents, you will have 100 different values of dynamic document property, each pertaining to a document. For example, I'll give you an example. So right now, how many files are being read? Right now, how many
one.
files are we reading? We are reading only one file, right? But when we started with this use case, we were trying to have each employee data in a separate file, isn't it? So in that case, if let's say I had 100 employees, how many files I might have had?
100 points.
We might have had 100 files, right? So now tell me, if you have a business requirement wherein you have to store the file names of all the files which are being read, right? So it means if you are reading 100 files, that means how many different properties you need to store those 100 file names?
100.
100, right? Let me repeat. Right now we are reading one employee data. Oh, sorry, we are reading one single file which is holding multiple employees data. But when we started with this whole process, right, we were reading the data in such a way that each employee data was there in a separate file. Now, what I'm saying is, if there is a business requirement wherein I need to store the file name, right, of each file which is being read, and given the fact that there are 100 employees data, then how many properties do we need to store those different file names? We need 100 properties, right? We need 100 placeholders. Yes or no? Each pertaining to a file. Yes. So or in other words, I can say for each document, there is a separate value, right? When something is going to change for each document and I want to store that, I will prefer to go for dynamic document property. Yes. But now in this case, how many files are being read?
Only one.
One file.
Only one.
Only one file. And that one file gets converted into how many documents when we read the data for the first time? One document, right? So in that case, I can go for dynamic process property. What I'll do is I'll create a dynamic process property. Generally, the convention is we give like this DPP, but there is no hard and fast rule. DPP stands for dynamic process property, and I will say something like initial payload. What is the meaning of payload? Payload represents your request data which is under execution. Okay. So this is my initial payload. This is a kind of a variable only. So here I am creating a dynamic process property with the name DPP underscore initial payload. Whenever you are creating these properties, make sure that you are making a note of these properties, because when you want to use these properties later on to retrieve the actual data which is stored in these properties, you have to use the exact same casing. These all properties are case sensitive. So what I'm saying is, I'm saying this is my property, and in this property I'm going to store something. So I'll go to plus. So there are different, so this is called as a parameter section, right? When I go to the parameter section, I have different types. So there is a type called as static, there is a type called as connector data, there is a type called as cross reference lookup, there is a type called as current data. So this current data has the tendency to give you the actual data which is under execution at the moment this shape gets executed. When this set property shape gets executed, what is there in my current data? What is the current data?
Request payload.
This is nothing but request payload, right? And that request payload, I'm storing it in a property. Why I'm doing that? So that I can retrieve it later on. So that I can retrieve the request payload later on using this property. I will repeat. So what I'm saying is, after this disconnector, right after this disconnector, I'm using a set property shape. In set property shape, what I'm setting, I'm trying to set the value for a dynamic process property. Why I'm using a dynamic process property? Because whenever we have a single value to be stored that we want to use across the process, then we prefer dynamic process property. So right now I have some payload which I want to refer maybe throughout my process, anywhere inside my process. So I created a dynamic process property with the name DPP underscore initial payload. And in this, I'm storing a parameter, and that parameter is which one? Current data. So this parameter will give you the actual payload, and that payload will be stored in the DPP. And what is the name of the DPP? DPP underscore initial payload. So if let's say something gets wrong, right? Something errors out. What I have to do in the error handler, I have to pass the request payload. So how can you get it, guys? Now you have to go to functions. In the functions, do you see any, if there are any functions related to properties?
Properties.
Okay, you go to properties. Under properties, do you see any functions, or do you see any function which will help you to retrieve the value of a dynamic process property?
Get dynamic process property.
Okay, there is get dynamic process property. I will say, okay, now it is asking me the property name. What is the property name from where I can retrieve the value of the payload?
DPP underscore initial payload.
It is DPP underscore initial payload. Just make sure it is exactly same name as it was given while setting the value, because this all is case sensitive. I hit okay. And out of this, can I do this mapping? Are you guys following so far?
So, I have one question. In that get document property, there was one field like default value. So if we have given some value in that, then that the value will be overridden by that.
No,
Our,
default value will come into picture when typically your dynamic process property is empty.
Okay.
Okay. So now the next thing is execution ID. What is execution ID, guys? Execution ID is the unique identifier for each execution of Boomi, for each execution of Boomi process, right? Using this ID, we can track the complete flow of execution. Using this ID, we can track the complete flow of execution. This is very, very important. Okay. And again, a very important note, this might be asked in the interviews. We should always capture the execution ID right after the start of the process. Note, a very, very important note, very, very few people are aware about it. Execution ID value gets changed after the try catch shape. Okay. So the parent execution ID must always be captured before any try catch shape. So you must capture it before any try catch shape. Okay, let us leave it for now. So what I'm trying to say is there is a unique ID. And what is that ID called as a execution ID? That ID will help you to track the complete flow of execution, right? So when you right now, have we done any kind of deployment for this process so far? No, right? We haven't done any deployment, but in real time, after the development, you will deploy your process, right? You will do the go live. Go live means you will make them operational. And after that, once you make them operational, let's say somebody came to you and said that this particular order or this particular employee data is not reaching to the target system, right? So in all such scenarios, whenever this process will execute, a unique ID will get created for this process, and that unique ID is called as an execution ID. Using that execution ID, you can track your complete flow of execution. Okay, using that execution ID, you can track your complete flow of execution. So what we will do here right now, right after the start shape, what I will set, what I'll use another set property shape. Why I'm using this set property shape? Because I want to store the value of what? Execution ID. So what I'll do is I'll go here, I'll create a property and I'll create a dynamic process property. Why I'm creating dynamic process property? Because this execution ID will be one, right, for the whole process. If there is something one for the whole process, then we have to go for dynamic process property. I will say DPP underscore execution ID. Is it mandatory to start your dynamic process property with DPP name?
No,
It's not mandatory. It's not mandatory. So what I'm saying is there is a dynamic process property. The name of the dynamic process property is DPP underscore execution ID. And in this property, I want to get my execution ID. Now the question is, how do I get my execution ID? I'll go to the parameter section. I will click on this drop down. In this drop down, do you see there is something called as execution property? Yes. I'll go here, and in this execution property, do you see there are different execution properties? Account ID, atom name, document count, and there is something more, right? And what is that?
Execution ID.
Execution ID. Yes. Can you see there was something else which could have been helpful for us, which we hard coded?
Process name.
Process name.
Process name.
Process name.
Process name also is there, right? Which was hard coded earlier. But if we want to get the process name dynamically, then also there is a mechanism under which property?
Execution property.
Under execution property. But right now I need execution ID. I'll say okay. So what I'm doing is I'm storing the execution ID over here, right? And what is the name of this property? DPP underscore execution ID. Now you have to tell me if I want to retrieve the value of this property here in this map, right? You guys have to tell me. Can anybody tell me what do we do about it? How do we retrieve this value?
You can go on that get dynamic process property.
So I have to go to first of all go to functions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you have to go to properties.
Properties.
Then you have to go to
Get dynamic process property.
and here you have to populate the execution ID, and this execution ID you have to map like this. Yes.
Yeah, Sumit, in first of such property shape, if we want to store process name, so can we do that?
Yes.
In
So now
single, yeah.
So now there is a set property shape where we were using the execution ID, right? Now let's say we don't want to hard code the process name, right? Because now we have got a better understanding about things and we realize that it was not required to hard code the process name. So in that case, what I can do is I can go here, right? I can click on plus. So what I'm creating a new property with the name under which one? Dynamic process property, because process name is going to be same, right? Throughout the process. So now this is property number 1 and this is property number 2. For property number 2, have we set the value?
No, parameters.
Go to parameters. Which parameter? Which type of parameter?
Execution property.
Execution property. Which
Process.
drop down?
Process name.
Process name. Hit OK. So we'll say process name. Hit OK. Now this is done. And now if I have to retrieve this value, what I have to do?
Functions.
Go to function.
Property.
Dynamic process property.
We have to go to get or set.
Yeah, yeah.
We have to, so for dynamic process property, there are two, get or set. Which one should we use?
It,
We have to use get because we have to retrieve the value, right? Set means setting the value. So we have to retrieve the value. So we'll use get. And here I will give the same name. Yes. And now what I'll do this mapping. So do we need some default value now?
No.
Oh,
We don't need. So I can go and I can remove it. So these kind of things you will do very, very frequently when you're working. So now what we'll do is before we go ahead, we'll do a quick test, right? To see if things are working as expected or we are doing something wrong. All right. So I'll go here to the shape source data. Okay, so here we have some data, or maybe you can see like this. Can you see the process name, guys, getting automatically populated? Yes or no? Can you see the error code? Can you see the error message also came automatically? From which property did we receive this error message?
metadata try catch message.
Very nice. So there is a document
Right.
property under under the document property, there is some section called as metadata, where we have a property called as try catch message. Then you see the date time also. Can you see the payload?
Yeah.
Yes. Then can you see a unique ID, execution ID? Okay, so now you can see all these, or you can see all these values getting populated. So it means we have been able to create that error data, right? And this error data can be sent to the child process. This is one way, right? This is one way to do this. So this is my data. Just hold on. You can whenever you want to copyright, and if it is, sometimes you will face issues. So you can always use like this also. Okay. For copying, you can just turn off the formatted view and you can make a note. It becomes a little easier. With the formatted view on, you cannot copy the payload sometimes. So this is my payload. This looks absolutely fine to me, right? Any questions so far from anyone? All right. So now we have been able to achieve this, right? So the next thing is, how do we do this with the message shape, right? How do we do with the message shape? So what I'm saying is, instead of using these two things, can we achieve same thing with the message shape? Answer is yes, we can achieve it. So let's say this was my message shape, something like this. You will see this kind of mechanism very, very frequently. So now let's say this is your target format. Do you have the target format, which is more or less like this, isn't it? This is my target format. In this format only I need the data, right? So what I'll do is I'll copy this target format like this. Okay. So now in this one, so this, when I write like this is kind of a static document, right? Static document means everything is kind of hard coded. But can we make this as a static document? No, right? We cannot have the same error, right? Everything cannot be same always. So this structure can be static, right? But the data which is getting populated inside is not static, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this whole data which got populated. I'm just going to utilize the structure. That's all. This is my target format structure. Where does it end? Okay, let's assume it looks like this. Okay, or maybe we may have some more reserved fields, or we may not have the reserved fields for the timing. This is how it looks. Any questions so far from anyone? So now here what you can do is, to get this data dynamically, you can create placeholders. Curly braces 1, curly braces close. Okay, so it is not necessary it has to start from 1. It can be 2 also, but generally you have to go in an order: 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, 6, and 7. So what does that mean? So you are creating placeholder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and these values have to be replaced. Okay, you cannot use any other braces. You have to use curly braces only. If you remember, or if you just observe it properly, can you see there are curly braces, one example, and all that stuff? Yes. So now for this process name, you want a value, right? So what I can do is, have I stored the value for that process name in some property? Yes or no? I'll come back to this, and for one, I'll create a placeholder here. And what I'll do, I'll say, I want to get the value from where? Dynamic process property and DP. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So this one will be replaced by this one. I'm saying the process name value should be retrieved from a dynamic process property, and the dynamic process property name is DPP underscore process name. Second thing is error code. Error code, let's say, is hard coded to 500. So I'll say static. So now this 2 will be replaced by this 2. Let's say I write 2 over here and 1 over here. Can anybody tell me what is going to happen?
500 process,
Process name
500 will be
will-
stored in process.
Process name becomes 500.
Absolutely correct. If you change this order, and this is again a certification question, they deliberately change this order and they expect, or they ask you to find out things, and that you will only know when you have worked in real time, right? If you will change this order, it does not give any error, but your process name will become 500 and your error code will become your process name, right? Very nice. So now the error type, okay, let's say error type is again hard coded, which is technical. What about error message, guys? How should I get error message?
Document property.
So we'll click on plus. Here we will go for document property. Which document property? Metadata, base, and try catch message. Hit OK. Error date time. So you have different formats over here, right? So let's say I feel this is a better one. For XML, actually, this is the right format. Okay. Request payload, from where we can get?
initial payload.
Come again.
Sorry, dynamic process property, DPP initial payload.
Okay, so we have a dynamic process property with the name initial payload, which is over here. I'll go here. Very nice. We'll go here and we will add a new one. What will be the name? Dynamic process property, initial payload, 6. What about the 7th one, execution ID? We have
Dynamic process property execution.
So this is the 7th one. I will choose a dynamic process property and I'll give the name. So now if you see over here, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you had some structure defined, but these values you are getting dynamically, right? Let's save everything. Let's run it. So we'll come over here, right, to the process called shape. We'll see shape source data. We'll see the document. Okay. So now if you see this, there is a request payload, and within this request payload, this whole data is there, right? So whenever you have some kind of XML, right? So this is, so the under this request payload, there is some XML, isn't it? Yes. This whole data which I'm highlighting, is it like an XML or not? This is your employees data, right?
Yes.
Now this is like you have one XML and within that you have another XML, isn't it? See, you just observe it. Process name getting populated properly, error code, error message, this all is fine. Error date time is also fine, right? Even if you see the execution ID is fine. Only focus on the request payload. If you see the request payload, when I use that map function, right, we were getting something like ampersand LT and all that stuff, right? So it automatically converted into a string, right? But now here this is coming as a pure XML. Right now it is not giving error, but if you will process it further, it will start giving an error. Okay, what error it will give? It will give an error that this cannot be parsed because you cannot have XML inside XML, right? So this is kind of not right way. So whenever you have such kind of scenarios, it is generally recommended to use something called as C data. Is anybody aware what is C data? C data means character data. So whatever comes inside this, that is not parsed by the, or that is considered as a string by the XML parser. So right now what we are doing is we are creating an XML, but this XML is not going to the XML parser. But if you want to process it further, you will have to send it to the XML parser, and XML parser might give you an error that there is an XML inside an XML, which may not be correct. So what we do is we use a C data. By using the C data, what happens is whatever is there inside the C data, right, that is ignored by the parser. Okay, parser is not going to parse this part. Okay, when parser is not going to parse this part, then we will not get any error. Okay, you will understand this. I will extend this process further. You will understand why I had to use C data. Okay, because C data, even you can do a little bit research about C data. C data stands for character data. And whenever you want XML parser to ignore certain section of your XML from parsing, you can always wrap that inside C data. Any questions about this? How to retrieve execution ID? How to get the process name? So now, instead of using two shapes, we could achieve this whole with the message shape also, right? So what came as an input to the message shape?
Empty document.
Empty
No,
document.
yeah.
Yeah, it's an empty document, right? But and it could produce a different document, which is nothing but a XML document, right? So it converted the data from one format to another, empty document to a XML document. So we'll continue this. We'll go to the error handling. Okay, we'll try to do integrations with ServiceNow. We'll try to send emails, and we'll see how this will look. And you will understand why I have kept that into C data. But that's fine. I hope for the timing you understand what is data pass through, what is set properties. You see, we are using set properties so frequently now, right? What is execution ID? How do we retrieve the value? How do we retrieve the error message? Right? And it will take you some time. We'll do these kind of exercises, very frequently, so that you get accustomed or you get familiarized with all these process. So we'll take a pause over here, guys. We'll continue tomorrow. Any questions from anyone?